The moment Vincent Dalton's horse collapsed beneath him in the scorching Texas heat, he knew he was going to die out here unless someone found him soon. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty plains between San Antonio and Terlingua, turning the earth into a furnace that seemed determined to bake every living thing into dust. Vincent had been traveling for 3 days straight, pushing himself and his mount harder than he should have, trying to make it to Terlingua before the land baron Samuel Griggs could foreclose on his family's ranch. The letter he carried in his saddlebag held the proof that Griggs had falsified the debt records, but it would not matter if he died out here in the middle of nowhere. He stumbled forward on foot, leading his exhausted horse by the reins, knowing the animal needed rest and water desperately. His own canteen had run dry that morning, and the last creek he passed had been nothing but cracked mud and broken dreams. The landscape shimmered in the heat, creating mirages that taunted him with visions of water that did not exist. Vincent was 24 years old, tall and broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with dark hair that hung past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He had left his family's spread 5 days ago, after discovering that Griggs had been systematically destroying evidence of his corruption, and the only person who could testify to the truth was a land office clerk in San Antonio who had finally grown a conscience. That clerk had given Vincent the documents he needed, but time was running short, his vision blurred as he trudged forward, each step becoming harder than the last. The horizon wavered and danced, and for a moment he thought he saw a figure in the distance. He blinked hard, trying to clear his eyes, but the figure remained. It was moving, coming closer, and as it approached he could make out the shape of a woman on foot, carrying what looked like a heavy bundle. She was struggling. That much was clear even from a distance. Her dress was torn and dusty, her hair hanging loose around her shoulders, and she moved with the desperate determination of someone who had no other choice but to keep going. When she was close enough that he could see her face, Vincent realized she was younger than he had first thought, probably around his own age, with delicate features that were currently twisted in exhaustion and pain. "Miss," he called out, his voice rough and cracked from thirst. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him with eyes the color of honey, and in that moment something shifted in Vincent's chest, a feeling he could not quite name but that seemed to fill him with a strange sense of purpose. She was beautiful despite her disheveled state, with high cheekbones and full lips that were cracked from the sun. Her dress, though dirty and torn, had once been a fine garment, suggesting she came from means. "I need help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I have been walking since yesterday. My wagon broke down and my driver abandoned me when we were attacked by bandits. They took everything except this one bag, and I managed to run while they were fighting over the spoils." Vincent's protective instincts surged to life despite his own desperate situation. He looked at his horse, knowing the animal barely had strength left, then back at the woman who was swaying on her feet. Without hesitation, he reached for his saddlebag and pulled out a cloth-wrapped package. Inside was a small amount of jerky and, more importantly, a half-full canteen he had been saving for his horse. "Here," he said, offering her the canteen. "Drink slowly, not too much at once or you will make yourself sick." She stared at the canteen as if she could not believe what she was seeing. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, and when her fingers brushed against his, that strange feeling in Vincent's chest intensified. She brought the canteen to her lips and drank carefully, following his instructions even though he could see the desperate thirst in her eyes that wanted her to gulp it all down. When she finally lowered the canteen, she looked at him with such intensity that he felt pinned in place. "You gave me more than I asked," she said softly, tears welling in her eyes. I only asked for help, but you gave me hope when I had none left." Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. "What is your name, Miss?" "Eleanor Vance," she replied, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "My father owns a freight company that operates between here and El Paso. I was traveling to meet him in Terlingua when we were attacked." The name Vance rang familiar in Vincent's mind. He had heard his father speak of James Vance before, a freight magnate who had started from nothing and built an empire through hard work and fair dealing. If this woman was his daughter, then she was indeed from significant means, though that seemed to matter little out here where wealth could not buy water or safety. "Vincent Dalton," he introduced himself. "My family has a ranch near Terlingua, or we did until Samuel Griggs decided he wanted our land. I am heading there now to try to stop him from taking everything we have built." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Griggs, that man is poison. My father has had dealings with him before and warned me to stay clear of his operations. He is ruthless and corrupt, and he has half the judges in this territory in his pocket. Which is why I need to get to Terlingua as fast as possible," Vincent said, looking at his exhausted horse with concern. "But my mount is nearly finished, and I fear we are still a full day's ride from town." Eleanor looked at the horse, then at Vincent, then down at her own feet which were bleeding through her ruined shoes. "We could both die out here if we do not help each other," she said quietly. "Your horse needs rest and water. There is a way station about 6 miles east of here. My driver mentioned it before he ran off. If we can make it there, we might find help." Vincent considered this. 6 miles on foot in this heat was a death sentence for most people. But if they traveled during the cooler evening hours and rationed what little water remained, they might have a chance. The way station would have supplies, fresh horses, and most importantly, a telegraph line to Terlingua. "We rest here until the sun starts to drop," Vincent decided. "Then we walk through the night. My horse can carry the supplies in your bag, but neither of us should ride him until he has had proper rest and water." They found what little shade existed beneath a scraggly mesquite tree and settled in to wait out the worst of the day's heat. Vincent gave Eleanor some of the jerky and watched as she ate slowly, clearly trying to make it last. He found himself studying her profile, noting the determined set of her jaw and the intelligence in her eyes. She was not some pampered society lady who would fall apart in a crisis. There was steel in her spine, and he respected that. "How did you end up traveling with only one driver?" he asked after a while. "Seems dangerous for someone like you." Eleanor's expression hardened. "My father did not know I was coming. He had forbidden me to travel until the bandit troubles settled down. But I had received word that his partner was planning to betray him during an important negotiation in Terlingua. I could not send a telegram because I feared the wrong people would intercept it, so I hired a driver and guard to take me there in person. The guard was killed in the attack, and the driver ran off the moment things got dangerous." "Your father is lucky to have a daughter willing to risk so much for him," Vincent said quietly. "He is all I have left," Eleanor replied. "My mother died when I was young, and he raised me himself while building his business. I learned the freight trade at his knee, can read a contract as well as any lawyer, and can shoot a rifle better than most men. But none of that mattered when those bandits came upon us with their guns blazing." Vincent felt his admiration for her grow. "When this is over, when we both reach Terlingua and deal with our respective troubles, I would like to hear more about your life. You are not like any woman I have met before." Eleanor turned to look at him fully, and he saw a flush rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the heat. "You are different too, Vincent Dalton. Most men I have met would not have shared their water with a stranger when they were dying of thirst themselves. You barely know me, Yet you gave me what might have been the difference between your life and death." "Some things are more important than survival," Vincent said, surprised by his own words. "What kind of man would I be if I let someone suffer when I had the means to help?" They sat in companionable silence as the sun tracked across the sky, and Vincent found himself acutely aware of Eleanor's presence beside him. She had a quiet strength that drew him in, and the more they talked, the more he wanted to know everything about her. She told him about growing up in the freight camps, learning to handle horses and manage accounts, while other girls her age were learning to sew and play piano. He told her about the ranch, about the years of hard work his family had put into building something lasting, only to have Griggs manufacture false debts to steal it away. As the sun finally began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they prepared to move. Vincent's horse had rested, though the animal still needed water desperately. They divided up the remaining supplies, with Eleanor insisting on carrying her own bag despite Vincent's protests. "I am not helpless," she said firmly, "and you need your strength to lead us to that way station. We help each other, or we both fail. Those are the only options." They walked through the cooling evening, the temperature dropping mercifully as night approached. Vincent kept Eleanor talking, knowing that conversation would help keep her focused and moving despite her exhaustion and pain. She asked him about his family, and he told her about his parents who had come to Texas from Virginia after the war, seeking a fresh start in a place where the past did not matter as much as a person's willingness to work hard. "My father always said that this land rewards those who respect it and destroys those who try to conquer it," Vincent said as they trudged through the darkness, the stars blazing overhead in brilliant profusion. "Griggs does not understand that. He sees the land as something to be exploited and used up, not something to be nurtured and protected." "My father says the same thing about the freight business," Eleanor replied. "He always treated his drivers and workers fairly, paid them well, and made sure their families were cared for. His competitors thought he was foolish, but in the long run, his loyalty to his people has made his company stronger than any of theirs." They walked for hours, stopping occasionally to rest and share tiny sips from the dwindling canteen. The night was cool and clear, and despite the desperate nature of their situation, Vincent found himself feeling oddly content. There was something about Eleanor's presence that calmed him, that made the impossible journey feel manageable. It was well past midnight when they finally saw the dim lights of the way station in the distance. Vincent felt a surge of relief so powerful that his knees nearly buckled. They were going to make it. Eleanor let out a small cry of joy and grabbed his arm, and without thinking, Vincent pulled her into a brief embrace. "We did it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You were right about the location." Eleanor looked up at him, her face barely visible in the starlight, and Vincent felt his heart skip a beat. There was something in her eyes, a warmth and connection that went beyond mere gratitude for shared survival. Before he could analyze the feeling, she pulled back, though her hand remained on his arm. "Let us get to that station before I collapse," she said with a shaky laugh. "I do not think I have ever been so tired in my entire life." The way station was a rough structure of adobe and timber, with a small stable and a corral that held several horses. A lantern burned in the window, and as they approached, the door opened to reveal a grizzled old man with a shotgun in his hands. "Who goes there?" the man called out. "We do not open for business in the middle of the night. Two travelers in desperate need," Vincent called back. "We have been walking since sunset and need water supplies and, if possible, fresh horses. We can pay." The old man studied them for a long moment, then apparently decided they were not a threat. He lowered the shotgun and gestured for them to come closer. "Name is Hank Porter. I run this station. You folks look like you have been through the fires of hell itself." "Close enough," Eleanor said wearily. "We were both stranded on the road after separate incidents. Bandits, broken wagons, exhausted horses. We pooled our resources to make it here." Hank's eyes narrowed as he looked them over more carefully. "You would not happen to be Eleanor Vance, would you?" James Vance's daughter, Eleanor, straightened despite her exhaustion. "I am. Do you know my father?" "Know him well enough," Hank said, his expression softening. "He has used my station for years, always pays fair and treats my people right. He has been tearing up the territory looking for you, miss. Got word 3 days ago that your wagon was attacked and you were missing. He is in Terlingua right now, near out of his mind with worry." Eleanor's face crumpled, and Vincent instinctively reached out to steady her. "I need to get word to him immediately," she said. "Does the telegraph line still work?" "It does, though the operator does not come on duty until dawn," Hank replied. "But I can send a rider to Terlingua if it is urgent. It would take most of the day, but he could be there by tomorrow evening." "Please," Eleanor said. "Tell him I am safe and will be there as soon as I can arrange transportation, and tell him to be careful of his partner, Robert Sterling. I have reason to believe Sterling is planning to betray him during the cattle contract negotiations." Hank nodded seriously. "I will send my best rider immediately. Now let us get you folks inside. Get some water and food in you, and tend to that horse of yours." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Vincent's horse was taken to the stable and given water and feed. Vincent and Eleanor were brought inside, where they drank their fill of cool well water and ate a simple but delicious meal of beans, cornbread, and salt pork. Hank's wife, a kind woman named Martha, tended to Eleanor's feet and provided her with clean clothes and a place to wash up properly. By the time dawn broke over the eastern horizon, Vincent felt almost human again. He had slept for a few hours in the station's small guest quarters, and when he woke, he found Eleanor already up and dressed in borrowed clothes, standing by the window and watching the sunrise. "Could not sleep any more?" he asked quietly as he approached. Eleanor turned to face him, and in the soft morning light she looked radiant despite everything they had been through. "I kept thinking about what you did yesterday," she said. "You gave me your water when you were just as desperate as I was. You risked your own life to help a complete stranger. I cannot stop wondering why." Vincent moved to stand beside her at the window. "I suppose I believe that we are all in this together in a way. Life out here is hard enough without us making it harder on each other. And besides," he added, meeting her eyes, "you were not really a stranger after we talked for even 5 minutes. I felt like I had known you much longer than that." Eleanor's breath caught, and Vincent saw his own confused feelings reflected in her expression. "I felt it too," she admitted, "like something just clicked into place when we met. I have never believed in fate or destiny or any of that, but Vincent, I cannot explain what I felt when I saw you yesterday. It was like the world suddenly made sense in a way it never had before." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. Her fingers were small and delicate compared to his work-roughened ones, but they fit together perfectly. "I know we have only known each other for less than a day," he said carefully, "and I know we both have urgent business to attend to in Terlingua. But Eleanor, I would like to see you again after all of this is settled. I would like to know if what I am feeling right now is real or just the result of shared hardship." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I would like that too, very much, but first we need to help our families. My father needs to be warned about Sterling's betrayal, and you need to stop Griggs from stealing your ranch. Those things have to take priority." "Agreed," Vincent said, though part of him wanted nothing more than to stay here in this moment, holding Eleanor's hand and watching the sunrise. Hank said he could provide us with fresh horses. We could ride together to Terlingua and arrive by late afternoon if we leave within the hour. Then let us go, Eleanor said with determination. Together. They purchased 2 strong horses from Hank's stock, along with fresh supplies for the journey. The ride to Terlingua took them through some of the most beautiful and unforgiving landscape in Texas. All rocky hills and desert vegetation, with mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. They rode hard but not recklessly, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and themselves. As they traveled, they continued to talk, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Vincent learned that Eleanor had been courted by several wealthy men over the years, but none of them had interested her, because they saw her only as James Vance's daughter, not as a person in her own right. Eleanor learned that Vincent had once hoped to expand the ranch, to build something even greater than what his parents had started, but that those dreams had been crushed when Griggs began his campaign of intimidation and fraud. "If we succeed in stopping him," Eleanor said as they rested the horses near a small creek, "what will you do then? Return to ranching?" "If there is still a ranch to return to," Vincent said grimly. "But yes, that is the only life I have ever known or wanted. The land is in my blood, Eleanor. I cannot imagine doing anything else." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, and Vincent could see she was thinking hard about something. Finally, she said, "My father's freight business moves cattle for ranchers all across this territory. If you manage to save your ranch, perhaps we could arrange a contract. Father always says he prefers working with people he trusts, and after what we have been through together, I trust you more than most people I have known for years." Vincent felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. "I would like that, though I hope we will see each other for reasons beyond just business." Eleanor's cheeks flushed pink. "I would like that too." They reached Terlingua as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the rugged landscape in shades of gold and crimson. The town was small but bustling, built around the mercury mines that had drawn fortune seekers and desperate men to this remote corner of Texas. The main street was lined with saloons, general stores, and a few more respectable businesses, including the land office where Vincent needed to file his evidence against Griggs. "My father will be staying at the Grand Hotel," Eleanor said as they rode down the main street, drawing curious looks from the townspeople. "It is the only decent lodging in town." "Where do you need to go first?" "The land office," Vincent replied, "but it is probably closed at this hour. I should find a place to stable these horses and get a room for the night. Tomorrow morning I will file the documents and hope that Judge Morrison is not as corrupt as everyone seems to think." "Judge Morrison is fair," Eleanor said. "I have heard my father speak of him. He cannot be bought or intimidated, which is probably why he has survived this long in a place like this. If you can get your case before him, you have a chance." They found a stable near the hotel and saw to their horses, then stood together in the dusty street, suddenly uncertain. They had spent the last day and night in constant companionship, facing danger and hardship together, but now they were about to part ways to deal with their respective crises. "I should go find my father," Eleanor said, though she made no move to leave. "He will be frantic with worry, and I need to warn him about Sterling before it is too late. And I should find a place to stay and prepare my case for tomorrow," Vincent replied, equally reluctant to say goodbye. "But Eleanor, can I see you later?" "Perhaps for dinner, if your reunion with your father goes well." Eleanor smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I would like that very much. Meet me at the hotel restaurant at 7 o'clock, By then I will have talked to my father and you will have had time to rest and prepare." Before Vincent could respond, Eleanor stood on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. Then she turned and hurried toward the hotel, leaving him standing in the street with his heart pounding and his face burning where her lips had touched. Vincent found a room at a smaller boarding house down the street, cleaned himself up properly for the first time in days, and spent the next few hours reviewing the documents he had obtained in San Antonio. The evidence was damning, showing clearly that Griggs had falsified debt records and forged signatures to make it appear that Vincent's father owed him substantial sums. With these papers and testimony from the San Antonio clerk, who had provided a signed affidavit, Vincent had a real chance of stopping the foreclosure. But as he worked, his mind kept drifting back to Eleanor. He thought about the way she had looked in the sunrise, about her strength and intelligence, about the connection he felt with her that seemed to defy logical explanation. They had known each other for barely a day, yet he could not imagine his life without her in it now. At precisely 7 o'clock, Vincent arrived at the Grand Hotel restaurant, wearing the cleanest clothes he owned and with his heart in his throat. The restaurant was elegant by Terlingua standards, with white tablecloths and actual china plates. He spotted Eleanor immediately, sitting at a table near the window with an older man who could only be her father. James Vance was a distinguished-looking gentleman in his 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He rose as Vincent approached, and Eleanor performed the introductions with obvious pride. "Father, this is Vincent Dalton, the man who saved my life. Vincent, this is my father, James Vance." James gripped Vincent's hand firmly, and there were tears in his eyes. "My daughter tells me you shared your last water with her when you were dying of thirst yourself, and that you walked through the night to get her to safety. I owe you a debt I can never repay, young man." "Your daughter is remarkable," Vincent said honestly. "She saved me as much as I saved her. We helped each other survive, and I would not have made it without her strength and determination." James studied Vincent for a long moment, then nodded as if satisfied with what he saw. "Eleanor also tells me you are facing trouble with Samuel Griggs. I want you to know that I have some influence in this town, and I will do everything in my power to help you fight that snake. Griggs is a cancer on this community, and it is past time someone cut him out." They sat down to dinner, and Vincent learned that Eleanor had already told her father about Robert Sterling's planned betrayal. James had immediately confronted his partner, who had confessed everything when faced with Eleanor's evidence. Sterling was even now being escorted out of town by the local marshal, his partnership dissolved, and his reputation ruined. "Thanks to my daughter's courage and your help in getting her here safely," James said, raising his glass in a toast. "I avoided a catastrophe that could have destroyed everything I have built. To Eleanor and Vincent, and to the strange fortune that brought them together." They drank to that, and Vincent felt Eleanor's eyes on him across the table. There was such warmth in her gaze, such promise of something wonderful just beginning, that he felt almost dizzy with happiness, despite the challenges he still faced. After dinner, James excused himself, claiming fatigue from his worry and relief at Eleanor's safe return. But Vincent caught the knowing look the older man gave his daughter, and he suspected that James was giving them time alone together. Vincent and Eleanor walked through the streets of Terlingua as the town settled into its evening rhythms. Saloon music drifted on the air, mixing with the sound of laughter and conversation. The night was cool and clear, with stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "My father likes you," Eleanor said as they walked. "He told me so while you were settling with the waiter. He said you have honest eyes and a good heart, and that he trusts my judgment in people." I am glad, Vincent said, because I very much want him to like me, given that I hope to be spending a great deal of time with his daughter in the future. Eleanor stopped walking and turned to face him fully. They were standing at the edge of town now, where the buildings gave way to open desert. Vincent, we have known each other for such a short time. Everything has happened so fast, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. I have never felt this way about anyone before, and it terrifies me and thrills me all at once. Vincent reached out and cupped her face in his hands, marveling at how right it felt to touch her. I feel exactly the same way. I know it seems crazy falling for someone after just a day, but Eleanor, when I look at you, I see my future. I see someone I could build a life with, someone who would be my partner in every sense of the word, and I want that more than I have ever wanted anything. Even more than saving your ranch, Eleanor asked softly. The ranch is land and buildings, Vincent said. Important, yes, and worth fighting for. But you are so much more than that. You are hope and joy and possibility. You are everything I did not know I was looking for until I found you standing in the desert looking like you were about to collapse. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Then we fight for both. We save your ranch tomorrow, and then we figure out how to build a life together. Because, Vincent, I am not letting you go. Not now, not ever. Vincent bent his head and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Eleanor kissed him back, her arms coming up to circle his neck, and for a long moment, the rest of the world ceased to exist. There was only the two of them, standing under the stars in the wild Texas night, holding on to each other and the impossible love that had bloomed between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor laughed shakily. We should probably get back before my father sends out a search party, but tomorrow, after you present your case to Judge Morrison, I will be there with you. You do not have to face Griggs alone. I would like that, Vincent said, taking her hand. Having you there would mean everything. They walked back to the hotel together, reluctant to part ways but knowing they both needed rest before the challenges of the next day. At the hotel entrance, Vincent kissed Eleanor one more time, then forced himself to walk away toward his boarding house. He looked back once and saw her standing in the doorway, watching him go with a smile on her face that made his heart sing. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Vincent was up early, too nervous to sleep anymore. He dressed carefully, gathered his documents, and made his way to the land office just as it was opening. To his surprise and delight, he found Eleanor and James already waiting for him on the front steps. "Did you think we would let you do this alone?" Eleanor asked with a smile. "My father knows the head clerk here, and I wanted to be with you for moral support." Together they entered the land office, where a thin, nervous man named Albert Prescott presided over shelves of legal documents and property records. Prescott's eyes widened when he saw James Vance, and he immediately became obsequious and eager to help. "Mr. Vance, what an honor. How can I assist you today?" "My friend Mr. Dalton here needs to file some important documents regarding his family's ranch," James said smoothly. "I believe there has been some confusion regarding debts allegedly owed to Samuel Griggs, and we have evidence that will clear the matter up." Vincent presented his documents, including the affidavit from the San Antonio clerk and the proof of Griggs's fraud. As Prescott reviewed the papers, his face grew paler and paler. When he finished reading, he looked up at Vincent with something like awe in his eyes. "This is explosive," Prescott said quietly. "If this information is accurate, and it certainly appears to be, then Samuel Griggs has committed multiple felonies. The foreclosure on your ranch is completely invalid, and there are probably dozens of other properties he has stolen through similar means." "Can you stop the foreclosure?" Vincent asked urgently. It is scheduled for today at noon. I can file a stay immediately pending a full hearing before Judge Morrison, Prescott said. And I will send word to the judge that this is a priority matter. Griggs has gotten away with this kind of thing for too long, and it is about time someone had the courage and evidence to stop him. Vincent felt relief wash over him so powerfully that his knees went weak. Eleanor grabbed his hand and squeezed it tightly, her eyes shining with pride and happiness. They had done it. The ranch was safe, at least for now, and Griggs would finally face justice for his crimes. But Prescott was not finished. I should warn you, though, Griggs will not take this lying down. He has allies in this town, including some very rough men who do his dirty work. You should be careful, Mr. Dalton. Desperate men do desperate things. Vincent will stay at the hotel with us, James said firmly. I have hired guards to watch the building, and Griggs will not dare try anything with so many witnesses around. We will see this through together. The hearing was scheduled for the next morning, and Judge Morrison agreed to fast-track the case given the seriousness of the allegations. Vincent spent the rest of that day preparing his testimony and trying to anticipate what arguments Griggs's lawyers might make. Eleanor stayed by his side the entire time, helping him organize his thoughts and offering encouragement when his confidence wavered. That evening, as they sat together in the hotel restaurant after another meal with James, Eleanor took Vincent's hand across the table. No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I believe in you. You are doing the right thing, standing up to corruption and fighting for your family. That takes courage, and it makes me love you even more. Vincent froze, his heart stopping in his chest. Love, he repeated softly. Eleanor, do you mean that? Eleanor's cheeks flushed, but she did not look away. I know it is too soon. I know people will say we are crazy. But yes, Vincent, I love you. I have loved you since you gave me that water in the desert, maybe even before that in some way I cannot explain. I love your kindness and your strength and your honor. I love the way you look at me like I am the most important thing in the world. I love you, and I needed you to know that before tomorrow, just in case something goes wrong. Vincent stood up abruptly, pulling Eleanor to her feet and into his arms, not caring that they were in a public restaurant with other diners watching. I love you too, he said fiercely. I have loved you from the moment you said I gave you more than you asked for. You saw something in me that I had forgotten was there, and you made me want to be the man you believed I was. I love you, Eleanor Vance, and nothing that happens tomorrow will change that. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and the restaurant erupted in applause and cheers. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Vincent saw James watching them with a satisfied smile on his face. I suppose I should start planning a wedding, James said dryly. Though I hope you two will wait at least until after we deal with Griggs before you elope. Father, Eleanor protested, but she was grinning. We will do this properly, Vincent promised. After the hearing tomorrow, after Griggs is dealt with and the ranch is secure, I will ask your permission formally to court your daughter. And then, if she will have me, I will ask her to marry me in front of everyone who matters to us both. She will have you, Eleanor said softly. I promise you that. They spent the rest of that evening making plans for their future, dreaming aloud about combining the ranch and the freight business, about building something together that would be stronger than either venture alone. James contributed ideas and advice, clearly delighted by the prospect of having Vincent as a son-in-law. And by the time they finally retired for the night, Vincent felt like he was walking on air. The next morning, the courtroom was packed with spectators eager to see Samuel Griggs finally face justice. Griggs himself sat at the defendant's table with two expensive lawyers, looking confident and unconcerned. He was a large man with cold eyes and a cruel mouth, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed out of place in rough Terlingua. When he saw Vincent enter with Eleanor and James, his expression darkened with rage. Judge Morrison was an older man with iron-gray hair and a reputation for absolute integrity. He called the court to order and listened carefully as Vincent presented his evidence and testimony. The San Antonio clerk's affidavit was particularly damning, detailing exactly how Griggs had paid him to falsify records and forge signatures. When it was Griggs's turn to defend himself, his lawyers tried every trick they could think of to discredit the evidence and attack Vincent's character. They suggested that Vincent had fabricated the documents out of desperation to avoid legitimate debts. They implied that the San Antonio clerk was lying to avoid his own prosecution for corruption. They even tried to suggest that James Vance was orchestrating the whole thing as part of some business vendetta. But Judge Morrison was not fooled. He questioned Griggs directly, and under oath, the land baron began to crack. His answers became evasive and contradictory, and when the judge ordered the land office to produce the original debt documents, they could not be found. Prescott testified that the files had been removed from the office by Griggs himself just days earlier, presumably to destroy evidence. By noon, Judge Morrison had heard enough. He brought down his gavel with a resounding crack and delivered his verdict. "I find that the evidence of fraud and forgery is overwhelming and incontrovertible," the judge declared. "The foreclosure proceedings against the Dalton Ranch are hereby dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into all property transfers involving Samuel Griggs over the past 10 years. Mr. Griggs, you are remanded into custody pending trial on charges of fraud, forgery, and theft. Sheriff, take him away." The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause as the sheriff and his deputies moved to arrest Griggs. The land baron's face turned purple with rage, and he lunged toward Vincent, screaming threats and curses. But the deputies grabbed him before he could do any damage, and he was dragged from the courtroom still shouting about revenge and justice. Vincent stood there in shock for a moment, unable to quite believe that it was over. Then Eleanor was in his arms, hugging him tightly and laughing with joy. James clapped him on the back and offered his congratulations, as did dozens of other townspeople who came forward to thank Vincent for standing up to Griggs's corruption. Outside the courthouse, Vincent took a moment to simply breathe and let the reality of what had happened sink in. The ranch was saved. His family's legacy was secure, and standing beside him, holding his hand and looking at him with love shining in her eyes, was the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. "You did it," Eleanor said softly. "You saved your family and brought a criminal to justice." "I am so proud of you, Vincent." "We did it," Vincent corrected. "I would never have made it to Terlingua without you, Eleanor. In every way that matters, we won this battle together." James approached them with a serious expression. "Vincent, I meant what I said last night. I would be honored to have you as part of my family. If you truly love my daughter and want to marry her, you have my blessing. Though I hope you will give her a proper courtship first, even if it is a short one." Vincent took both of Eleanor's hands in his and looked into her eyes. "Eleanor Vance, I know we have only known each other for a few days. I know that by all reasonable standards this is happening much too fast, but I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You are brave and brilliant and beautiful, and you make me want to be a better man. Would you do me the honor of allowing me to court you properly, with the intention of asking you to be my wife when the time is right?" Eleanor's eyes filled with happy tears. "Yes, Vincent, 1,000 times yes." though I should warn you that I have no intention of being a patient woman when it comes to setting a wedding date. I want to marry you as soon as possible, and I do not care what anyone thinks about the speed of our courtship." Vincent laughed and pulled her close, kissing her soundly while James chuckled and shook his head. They spent the rest of that day celebrating, first with a fine meal at the hotel, and then with a tour of the town where Vincent introduced Eleanor to everyone he knew. The story of how they had met and fallen in love in the desert had already spread through Terlingua, and everywhere they went, people congratulated them and wished them well. That evening, as the sun set over the distant mountains, Vincent and Eleanor walked to the edge of town just as they had done 2 nights before. But this time, everything was different. The danger had passed, the battles had been won, and they stood on the threshold of a beautiful future together. "When should we get married?" Eleanor asked, leaning against Vincent's chest as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I am serious about not wanting to wait too long. What about a month from now?" Vincent suggested. "That would give us time to travel to your father's home, wherever that is, and have a proper wedding with all your friends and family present. And it would give me time to bring my parents to meet you and receive their blessing as well." "A month," Eleanor said thoughtfully. "I suppose I can wait that long, though it will be difficult. Where will we live, Vincent?" "At your ranch, if you are willing," Vincent said. "I know it is not much compared to what you are used to, but it is home to me. We could build a bigger house, something worthy of James Vance's daughter. And with your father's freight business, we could make the ranch more profitable than it has ever been." "I do not need a big house," Eleanor said firmly. "I need you and a place where we can build our life together. The ranch sounds perfect. Though I should warn you that I will want to be involved in running it. I'm not content to just sit at home and embroider pillowcases while you do all the real work." Vincent laughed. "I would expect nothing less. You will be my partner in everything, Eleanor. That is what love means to me, being true equals working together toward shared dreams." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms and watching the stars come out one by one. Vincent thought about how close he had come to dying in the desert just days ago, and how that moment of near death had brought him the greatest gift of his life. If his horse had not collapsed exactly where it did, if Eleanor had not been walking that same stretch of road at that same moment, if he had not chosen to share his water with a stranger despite his own desperate thirst, none of this would have happened. "What are you thinking about?" Eleanor asked softly. "About fate," Vincent replied. "About how a simple act of kindness changed both our lives completely. You told me I gave you more than you asked for when I offered you that water. But Eleanor, you gave me so much more. You gave me hope and love and a future worth fighting for. You gave me everything." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "Then we gave each other everything that matters, and we will keep giving to each other every day for the rest of our lives. That is my promise to you, Vincent Dalton. I will love you and support you and stand beside you through whatever comes. You will never face anything alone again." "Neither will you," Vincent promised. "We are a team now from this moment forward. Whatever challenges we face them together." They sealed that promise with a kiss under the Texas stars, and both of them felt the absolute rightness of it, the sense that they had found exactly where they were meant to be and exactly who they were meant to be with. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity and planning. Vincent traveled to his family's ranch with Eleanor and James to introduce them and share the good news about the successful fight against Griggs. His parents, Robert and Sarah Dalton, welcomed Eleanor with open arms and tears of gratitude for the role she had played in saving their home. Sarah particularly took to Eleanor, impressed by the younger woman's intelligence and willingness to learn about ranch life. James worked with Robert to set up a contract for his freight company to move the Dalton Ranch's cattle to market, offering terms so favorable that Robert initially protested. It was too generous. But James insisted, saying that he considered Vincent family now, and that family looked out for each other in business as well as in life. Eleanor threw herself into learning everything she could about the ranch, rising before dawn to ride out with Vincent and help with the daily work. She learned to rope and brand cattle, to mend fences and repair equipment, and she did it all with enthusiasm and good humor, even when the work was dirty and exhausting. The ranch hands quickly came to respect her, and Vincent fell even more deeply in love watching her adapt to his world while never losing her own unique spirit. In the meantime, Sarah and Eleanor's maternal aunt worked together to plan the wedding, which would take place at the Vance family home in El Paso, where James maintained his business headquarters. The ceremony would be small but elegant, with only close family and friends in attendance, exactly as Vincent and Eleanor wanted it. 1 month to the day after Vincent had offered water to a thirsty stranger in the desert, he stood in the parlor of the Vance family home wearing his best suit and waiting for his bride to appear. His parents sat in the front row alongside James, all of them beaming with happiness. A minister from the local church stood ready to perform the ceremony, and a small group of friends and business associates filled the remaining seats. Then Eleanor appeared at the top of the stairs, and Vincent's breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple white dress that his mother had helped her make, with her hair arranged in soft curls around her face and a small bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. She was radiant, glowing with happiness, and as she descended the stairs with her eyes locked on Vincent's face, he felt tears of joy prick at his own eyes. James walked Eleanor down the makeshift aisle and placed her hand in Vincent's with a meaningful look that said clearer than words that he was trusting Vincent with his most precious treasure. Vincent squeezed Eleanor's hand gently and smiled at her, trying to convey without speaking how much this moment meant to him, how grateful he was for the chance to spend his life with her. The ceremony itself was brief but beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of love and partnership, and unwavering support through all of life's joys and challenges. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, and told Vincent he could kiss his bride, Vincent cupped Eleanor's face tenderly in his hands and kissed her with all the love and devotion in his heart. The reception that followed was a joyful celebration filled with music, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. James stood and raised his glass, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke about how he had feared he had lost his daughter when she went missing in the desert, and how Vincent had not only saved her life, but had proven himself worthy of her love through his courage and integrity. Robert and Sarah offered their own toast, welcoming Eleanor officially into the Dalton family and expressing their gratitude for her role in saving the ranch. But the most moving moment came when Eleanor herself asked to say a few words. She stood with Vincent's hand in hers and looked around at all the people who had gathered to celebrate their union. "A month ago I was lost and alone in the desert, certain I was going to die," Eleanor said, her voice clear and strong. Then a cowboy appeared, a man who was himself dying of thirst, and he offered me his water. When I asked why he would do such a thing, why he would give away something he needed desperately himself, he said that some things are more important than survival. In that moment, I knew I had met someone extraordinary. Vincent gave me water when I asked for help, but he gave me so much more than I asked for. He gave me hope and friendship and love. He gave me a future I never imagined I could have. And today, I give myself to him completely, promising to love him and stand by him for all the days of my life. To my husband, Vincent Dalton, the best man I have ever known." There was not a dry eye in the room when Eleanor finished speaking, and Vincent pulled her close and held her tightly, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion he felt. They danced together as man and wife for the first time, moving slowly to the music while everyone watched and smiled. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and the guests had departed, Vincent and Eleanor stood together on the balcony of their room overlooking the lights of El Paso. They had decided to spend their wedding night here before traveling back to the ranch the next day to begin their married life in earnest. "Happy?" Vincent asked, wrapping his arms around Eleanor from behind and resting his chin on top of her head. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Eleanor replied. "Though I will admit I am eager to get back to the ranch and start our real life together." As wonderful as this celebration was, what I really want is to wake up next to you every morning and work beside you every day, building something lasting together. "That is exactly what we will do," Vincent promised. "We will build a ranch that our children and grandchildren will be proud of. We will build a business that treats people fairly and creates opportunities for those who need them. And most importantly, we will build a love that lasts a lifetime and beyond." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "Children," she repeated thoughtfully. "We have not really talked about that yet. Do you want children, Vincent?" "With you?" "Absolutely," Vincent said without hesitation. "I want to fill our home with laughter and love and the sounds of little feet running through the halls. I want to teach our sons and daughters about the land and watch them grow into strong, capable adults who know the value of hard work and compassion. I want everything with you, Eleanor." "Then that is what we will have," Eleanor said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Everything we want, everything we dream of, together." They returned to the ranch the next day and threw themselves into the work of building their life together. Eleanor proved to be a natural rancher, with an instinct for animal husbandry and land management that impressed even the most experienced hands. She also brought her business acumen to bear on the ranch's finances, reorganizing their accounts and finding ways to increase efficiency and profitability. Within a year, the Dalton Ranch was more successful than it had ever been, and Vincent and Eleanor's partnership was the talk of the region. Other ranchers began to seek their advice, and James's freight company continued to give them favorable terms in recognition of their family connection. The ranch expanded, hiring more workers and taking on additional land that became available when Griggs's criminal empire collapsed, and his ill-gotten properties were returned to their rightful owners or sold at public auction. 2 years after their wedding, Eleanor gave birth to their first child, a healthy baby boy they named James Robert Dalton in honor of both their fathers. Vincent held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the perfect weight of the infant in his arms and the knowledge that this precious life was the product of his love with Eleanor. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered as Eleanor rested in their bed, exhausted but radiant. "You are perfect. I cannot believe how blessed I am." "We are blessed," Eleanor corrected gently. "Both of us together. This is our miracle, Vincent, the first of many, I hope." She was right. Over the next several years, they welcomed 3 more children into their growing family. A daughter named Sarah after Vincent's mother, then another son they called Thomas, and finally another daughter they named Grace. The house that Vincent had built for his bride expanded to accommodate their growing family, and it was always full of noise and laughter and love. Vincent's parents lived to see all their grandchildren born and to watch the ranch flourish under Vincent and Eleanor's leadership. James remained a vital presence in their lives as well, visiting often and delighting in spoiling his grandchildren shamelessly. He told everyone who would listen about how Vincent had saved Eleanor's life in the desert and how their love had transformed both their families for the better. The story of how Vincent and Eleanor met became something of a legend in Terlingua and the surrounding territories. Parents told it to their children as an example of how one act of kindness could change everything, and young couples facing hardship drew inspiration from the knowledge that true love could bloom even in the harshest circumstances. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Eleanor back to the spot where they had first met. He had arranged with his ranch hands to prepare everything in advance, and when they arrived at the location, Eleanor gasped in surprise. A small structure had been built there, a simple shelter with a cistern that would provide water for travelers in need. A sign hung above it reading, "The Dalton Vance Way Station. Water freely given to all who need it." "Vincent," Eleanor breathed, tears filling her eyes. "This is beautiful." "But why?" "Because 10 years ago, sharing water with a stranger changed my life," Vincent said simply. "I want to make sure that anyone who passes through here, anyone who needs help, can find it. We have been blessed beyond measure, Eleanor. The least we can do is pass some of that blessing on to others who need it." Eleanor threw her arms around him and kissed him deeply. "This is why I love you. This is why I will always love you. You have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known." They stood together at the way station, watching the sun set over the desert just as it had on the night they had first declared their love for each other. So much had changed since then, yet the essential truth remained the same. They were partners, equals, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. "You ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different?" Eleanor asked softly. "If your horse had not collapsed exactly where it did, or if I had taken a different route?" "Sometimes," Vincent admitted. "But then I remember something my mother used to say. She believed that the universe has a way of bringing together the people who need each other most. I needed you, Eleanor. I needed your strength and your love and your belief in me, and I like to think you needed me too in your own way." "I did need you," Eleanor confirmed. "I still do, every single day. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life." "When I said you gave me more than I asked for, I had no idea how true those words would prove to be. You gave me everything, Vincent. A home, a family, a purpose, and a love that grows stronger with each passing year." They stayed at the way station until the stars came out, making love under the desert sky just as they had on their wedding night and so many nights since. When they finally rode back to the ranch in the early morning hours, they were both filled with contentment and gratitude for the extraordinary life they had built together. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives do. Vincent's father, Robert, passed away peacefully at the age of 72, surrounded by his family and secure in the knowledge that his legacy was in capable hands. Sarah followed him 5 years later, her last words a blessing for her son and daughter-in-law and all their children. James Vance lived to the remarkable age of 81, remaining sharp and engaged with the freight business until the very end, when he slipped away quietly in his sleep with Eleanor holding his hand. Through it all, Vincent and Eleanor remained devoted to each other and to the principles that had guided them from the beginning. They treated their workers fairly, paid good wages, and created opportunities for those who needed them. They gave generously to the community, funding a school in Terlingua and supporting efforts to bring law and order to the still wild territories. And they made sure the way station where they had first met always had fresh water for travelers in need. Their children grew into remarkable adults. James Robert followed his father into ranching and eventually took over management of the Dalton spread, bringing his own innovations while respecting the traditions his parents had established. Sarah married a doctor and moved to El Paso, where she worked tirelessly to improve health care for the poor and underserved. Thomas joined his grandfather's freight company and expanded it throughout the Western territories. And Grace, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer and dedicating herself to fighting corruption and injustice in the court system. Vincent and Eleanor watched their children's successes with pride and contentment, knowing they had raised good people who would make the world better in their own ways. They became grandparents many times over, and their home remained a gathering place for the whole extended family, filled with love and laughter and the stories of their adventures. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a surprise celebration at the ranch. Nearly 100 people attended, including family, friends, workers, and townspeople from Terlingua who wanted to honor the couple who had given so much to the community. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and a wonderful feast that lasted late into the night. When Vincent was called upon to say a few words, he stood with Eleanor at his side, his arm around her waist, and looked out at all the faces of the people they loved. He was 54 years old now, his dark hair liberally streaked with silver, but his eyes were still as bright and his love for his wife as strong as it had been 30 years before. "I am not much of a speechmaker," Vincent began, "but I want to say something about the woman standing beside me. 30 years ago, I met Eleanor in the middle of the desert when we were both close to death. I gave her water from my canteen, and she told me I had given her more than she asked for. At the time, I did not understand what she meant. But now, after 30 years of marriage, after building a life and a family together, after facing every challenge and celebrating every triumph side by side, I finally understand. When you give love to someone, when you share your life with them completely and hold nothing back, you give them infinitely more than they could ever ask for. Eleanor gave me that gift, and I have tried every day to give it back to her. To my wife, my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. Thank you for 30 extraordinary years. I look forward to 30 more." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, and Eleanor pulled Vincent down for a kiss that drew even louder applause. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor laughed through her tears and addressed the crowd herself. "Vincent says he is not a speechmaker, but he just made me cry in front of everyone," she said with mock reproach that fooled no one. "So let me add just this. Marriage is not always easy. There are hard times and disappointments and moments when you wonder if you will make it through. But with the right person, with someone who truly sees you and loves you anyway, those hard times become bearable and the good times become extraordinary. Vincent has been that person for me. He has been my rock, my comfort, my joy, and my greatest adventure. I would not trade a single moment of our life together, not even the hard ones, because they all led us here to this beautiful family and this wonderful life. I love you, Vincent Dalton. I loved you when we met in the desert. I loved you on our wedding day, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." As the party continued around them, Vincent and Eleanor slipped away for a quiet moment together. They walked to the porch of their home and stood looking out over the ranch that had been the foundation of their life together. In the distance, they could see the lights of the bunkhouses where their workers lived, and beyond that the dark shapes of the cattle that represented their livelihood. It was a beautiful sight, made more beautiful by the knowledge that they had built it together through hard work and determination and unwavering love. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked, the same question he had asked on their wedding night and 1,000 times since. Happier than I ever imagined possible, Eleanor replied, the same answer she always gave because it was always true. You make me happy, Vincent, every single day. Even when we argue about the cattle rotation schedule or disagree about whether to expand the south pasture, even then I am happy because I am with you. Vincent pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. I feel the same way. I cannot imagine my life without you in it, Eleanor. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that my horse collapsed exactly where it did, exactly when it did, so that I could meet you. They stood there together as the sounds of the party drifted out to them, wrapped in each other's arms and in the comfortable silence of long companionship. 30 years together had not dimmed their love, but rather had deepened it, transforming the passionate intensity of their early days into something even more powerful and enduring. The years continued to pass peacefully. Vincent and Eleanor gradually transitioned more of the ranch's daily operations to James Robert while remaining involved in major decisions and long-term planning. They spent more time with their grandchildren, passing on stories and wisdom and the values that had guided their own lives. And they continued to make regular trips to the way station they had built, maintaining it personally and making sure it always had water for travelers in need. On their 40th anniversary, their entire family made the journey to the way station for a special celebration. 3 generations of Daltons and Vances gathered at the spot where Vincent and Eleanor's love story had begun, and together they dedicated a new plaque that told the full story of how a cowboy offered water to a thirsty stranger and found his soulmate in the process. Vincent was 64 now, his hair completely white, his face weathered by years in the sun. But when he looked at Eleanor, now 63 and still beautiful to him, he saw the same woman he had fallen in love with in the desert 40 years before. The years had been kind to her, adding character and grace to her features without diminishing her essential vitality and spirit. 40 years, Eleanor marveled as they stood together at the way station, their children and grandchildren surrounding them. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Do you remember what you said to me when you offered me that water? Vincent smiled. I asked if you were all right and told you to drink slowly. No, Eleanor corrected with a gentle laugh. After that, you said that some things are more important than survival. Those words changed my life, Vincent. They made me see that you were different from any man I had ever met, that you had a soul that understood what really matters in life. And you gave me hope when I had none left, Vincent replied. You showed me that even in the darkest moments, there is always light if you are willing to look for it. We saved each other that day, Eleanor. In every way that counts. Their oldest grandson, a boy of 15 named after Vincent, spoke up. Grandfather, will you tell us the story again? About how you and grandmother met. I never get tired of hearing it. Vincent and Eleanor exchanged a glance, and then together they told the story once more, taking turns with the details, finishing each other's sentences the way they always did. They told about the desert heat and the desperate thirst, about the moment their eyes met and both of them felt that inexplicable connection, about walking through the night to reach the way station and fighting to save the ranch and falling in love so fast it made their heads spin. The younger grandchildren listened with wide eyes, while the older ones, who had heard the story many times, still smiled and nodded at the familiar parts. When Vincent and Eleanor finished, there was a moment of reverent silence, and then spontaneous applause broke out. I want to find a love like that, Vincent's granddaughter Anna said wistfully. A love that lasts forever and gets stronger instead of weaker. Then remember what your grandmother and I learned, Vincent said seriously. Love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every single day. Choose kindness. Choose generosity. Choose to see the best in your partner even when they are not at their best. Choose to give more than you are asked for in love and in life. That is the secret. Eleanor squeezed his hand. And choose someone who chooses you back the same way. Someone who meets you as an equal and walks beside you as a partner. That is what your grandfather and I have always been to each other, and it has made all the difference. They spent the rest of that day at the way station, sharing food and memories and making new memories together as a family. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in the same shades of orange and purple that Vincent and Eleanor remembered from their first evening together, the family began to pack up to return to the ranch. But Vincent and Eleanor lingered a moment longer, standing hand in hand and watching the sunset just as they had done so many times before. They were older now, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but their love remained as powerful and true as ever. "I do not know how many more years we have," Vincent said quietly, "but however many there are, I want to spend every moment with you. You are my everything, Eleanor. My past, my present, my future, my heart and my home." Eleanor turned to face him fully, reaching up to touch his weathered cheek with gentle fingers. "Then we will face whatever comes together, just as we always have. And when our time finally comes, whenever that is, we will go knowing we lived a life full of love and meaning and purpose. We will go knowing we made a difference, that we left the world better than we found it. And that, my darling husband, is all anyone can hope for." Vincent pulled her close and kissed her softly, tenderly, with all the love of 40 years together and a lifetime still ahead. Around them, the desert evening settled into night, and the stars began to emerge one by one, eternal witnesses to a love that had defied all odds and lasted through everything life could throw at it. They lived many more years together, growing old with grace and dignity, surrounded by family and friends who loved them. Vincent passed away peacefully at the age of 76, with Eleanor holding his hand and whispering words of love into his ear. His last conscious thought was of the moment he had first seen her in the desert, and how that single instant had changed his entire life for the better. Eleanor followed him just 8 months later, as if she could not bear to be without him for very long. On a cool autumn evening, she sat on the porch of their ranch house, surrounded by all her children and grandchildren, and she told them one last time about the day she met Vincent, about how he had offered water to a thirsty stranger and given her so much more than she asked for, about how their love had been the greatest adventure and the greatest blessing of her life. "Take care of each other," she told her family as her strength began to fade. "Love generously and forgive freely. Build lives that matter and leave the world better than you found it. And remember that sometimes the most important things in life come from the simplest acts of kindness." Those were her last words, and when she closed her eyes for the final time, there was a smile on her face, as if she could already see Vincent waiting for her just beyond the veil. They were buried together on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple shared headstone that read, "Vincent Dalton and Eleanor Dalton, beloved husband and wife. They gave each other more than they asked for, and their love changed the world." The way station they had built at the place where they met remained a landmark for decades, maintained by their descendants, and used by countless travelers who needed help. The story of Vincent and Eleanor became part of the folklore of Texas, told and retold wherever people gathered to talk about love and courage and the power of simple kindness to change lives. And on quiet desert evenings when the sun sets in shades of orange and purple, and the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky, people sometimes say they can see two figures standing together at the old way station, holding hands and watching the sunset just as they did so many times in life. Whether it is really them or just a trick of the light and shadow, no one can say for certain. But those who believe in lasting love like to think it is Vincent and Eleanor, still together, even in death, still sharing the extraordinary bond they forged when a cowboy offered water to a thirsty stranger and found his soulmate in the harsh beauty of the wild Texas desert. Their children carried on their legacy, running the ranch with the same principles of fairness and generosity their parents had demonstrated. The Dalton Vance enterprises, combining ranching and freight operations, became one of the most successful and respected businesses in Texas, known not just for profitability, but for treating workers well and contributing to their communities. Each generation added their own innovations while staying true to the core values Vincent and Eleanor had established. The way station they built was eventually designated a historical landmark by the state of Texas, with interpretive signs telling the story of how it came to be. Schools brought students there on field trips to learn about the history of the region and about the power of compassion and love to transform lives. The site became a popular place for weddings, with couples choosing to exchange their vows at the spot where one of Texas's greatest love stories had begun. Over the years, many people claim to have been helped by the way station in moments of desperate need, finding water when they were dying of thirst or shelter when they were caught in sudden storms. Some of these travelers left notes in a logbook that the Dalton family maintained there, expressing their gratitude and adding their own small pieces to the larger story of how acts of kindness ripple outward through time. One such entry, written by a young woman in the 1920s, read, "I was traveling alone to El Paso when my automobile broke down. I walked for hours in the heat with no water, thinking I might die out here. Then I found this place and the cistern full of cool, fresh water. As I drank, I read the story of Vincent and Eleanor Dalton and how their love began here. It gave me hope that I too might find such a love someday. Thank you to whoever maintains this place and keeps this story alive." Another entry from the 1940s. "My grandfather worked for Vincent Dalton on his ranch and always said Mr. Dalton was the finest man he ever knew. My grandfather told me that Mr. Dalton once said that every person deserves dignity and respect, regardless of their station in life. That lesson has guided my own life, and I try to pass it on to my children. We stopped here today so I could show them where the story began and teach them about what real love and real character look like." The Dalton family's dedication to maintaining the way station and preserving Vincent and Eleanor's story never wavered through the generations. It became a point of family pride, a tangible connection to ancestors who had shown such courage and compassion. Every Dalton child, upon coming of age, was brought to the way station and told the full story of how their family's fortune and legacy had begun with a simple act of sharing water with a stranger. Some of Vincent and Eleanor's descendants followed them into ranching, while others pursued different paths. But all of them carried forward the values their legendary ancestors had embodied: integrity, generosity, courage, and an unwavering commitment to treating others with dignity and respect. The family produced teachers and doctors, lawyers and business leaders, artists and activists, all of them contributing to their communities and making the world a little better in their own ways. And whenever these descendants gathered for family reunions or holidays, they would inevitably share their favorite stories about Vincent and Eleanor. How Vincent had ridden through a blizzard to help a neighbor whose barn had collapsed. How Eleanor had started a lending library in Terlingua so that everyone, regardless of means, could have access to books and education. How they had opened their home to orphaned children during hard times, raising them alongside their own. How they had fought corruption and stood up for the powerless, even when it was dangerous to do so. But always, the storytelling would come back to that first meeting in the desert, to the moment when a dying cowboy offered his last water to a desperate stranger and set in motion a love story for the ages. Because that moment contained everything essential about who Vincent and Eleanor were, about the kind of people they had been, and the kind of legacy they had left behind. In that simple act of offering water when he had none to spare, Vincent had demonstrated that some things truly are more important than survival. In accepting that water and seeing it for what it truly was, a gift of the heart as much as a gift of the body, Eleanor had recognized the extraordinary soul of the man offering it. And in choosing to walk through the desert night together rather than apart, they had proven that two people working together with love and trust could overcome any obstacle. Their story became more than just a family legend. It became a testament to the enduring power of human connection, to the way a single choice to be kind can change not just two lives, but ripple outward to affect generations. It reminded people that love does not always come in the ways we expect, that sometimes it arrives in the middle of the desert when we are at our lowest point, offered by a stranger who sees us and chooses to help despite having every reason to look after only themselves. And so the story of Vincent and Eleanor Dalton lived on, told and retold wherever people gathered to talk about what matters most in life. It lived on in the way station that still stood in the desert, maintained by their descendants and still offering water to travelers in need. It lived on in the values they had instilled in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It lived on in the countless acts of kindness and generosity that people performed after being inspired by their example. But most of all, it lived on as a reminder that love, true love, is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about seeing another person's need and meeting it, about walking beside someone through the hardest times, about choosing each other again and again no matter what challenges arise. It is about giving more than is asked for and receiving the same in return. It is about building something together that is greater than either person could create alone. That was what Vincent gave Eleanor when he offered her water in the desert. Not just liquid to quench her thirst, but hope to revive her spirit. Not just a chance to survive another day, but a glimpse of what life could be with the right partner by her side. Not just kindness from a stranger, but the beginning of a love that would sustain them both through 47 years of marriage and a lifetime of building something meaningful together. And that was what Eleanor gave Vincent in return. Not just gratitude, though she was grateful. Not just companionship, though they were the best of companions. But a love that saw him exactly as he was, that appreciated his strength and kindness, and honored the values he held dear. A partnership that made him better than he would have been alone. A home and family and purpose that gave meaning to all his struggles and all his triumphs. They gave each other everything that matters, and in doing so, they left behind a legacy that would inspire people for generations to come. Their love story proved that even in the harshest environments, even when circumstances seem impossible, love can bloom and flourish and last a lifetime if both people are willing to choose it, to nurture it, to give more than they are asked for, and to accept what is freely given in return. That was the true miracle of Vincent and Eleanor Dalton. Not that they found each other against all odds, though that was remarkable. Not that they built a successful ranch and raised a wonderful family, though those were significant achievements. But that they showed everyone who knew them or heard their story what love could be at its finest. They showed that it is possible to build a life based on mutual respect and partnership. They showed that kindness matters, that integrity counts, that treating others with dignity and compassion creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see or measure. And somewhere, beyond the veil that separates this world from whatever comes next, Vincent and Eleanor Dalton remain together still, their love undiminished by death, watching over their descendants and smiling at the knowledge that their story continues to inspire and uplift. They are together at the end just as they were at the beginning, just as they were through every moment of the life they built together, because that is what real love is. Not a feeling that fades with time, but a choice that grows stronger with each passing day. Not perfection, but the willingness to see past imperfection to the soul beneath. Not the absence of hardship, but the presence of someone to face hardship with. Not a destination, but a journey taken hand in hand, step by step, through whatever comes. Vincent offered water to a thirsty stranger, and she told him he had given her more than she asked for. In that moment, neither of them could have imagined just how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how completely they would define the rest of their lives together. But looking back from the vantage point of a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that endured for generations, both of them would have agreed on one thing. They had given each other everything that matters, and in doing so, they had found the truest form of happiness that exists. That was the story of Vincent and Eleanor Dalton, a love born in the desert heat that grew into something as enduring as the Texas landscape itself, a testament to the power of kindness and the miracle of two souls finding each other exactly when they needed to most.